Dustin Baker, VikesNow, the February 28th. This is the final day of February. We are less than 2 weeks from free agency opening up for the Minnesota Vikings and every other team in the NFL. But today we're going to talk about a familiar topic, and that is Kirk Cousins and the focus on his upcoming contract extension or lack thereof. To level set, the Vikings have 3 options with Kirk Cousins. The man is under contract through the end of next year, and he'll be paid handsomely in that $36.5 million cap hit range to be the Vikings quarterback one. Rarely do franchise quarterbacks go on to the final year of their deals, and therefore, right about now, like clockwork, is about the time that the Vikings add on an extra year or two and keep Cousins glued to the roster. However, this year is a little bit different because the team flamed out of the postseason. They lost at home to a Giants team that wasn't very good in the first place. That was embarrassing. So there is some sentiment that with a new head coach, new as of last year, and general manager, they might just be content riding this thing out with Cousins and going to pick, quote, their, end quote, guy. Either this draft, the following draft. I think the only thing we know for sure is they're not going to go sign some journeyman free agent like Marcus Mariota and call it good. They're either going to retain Cousins or shoot for the stars with a quarterback on a rookie deal for 4 or 5 years. Otherwise, they could approach Cousins for a trade, and then he would dictate where he wants to go because he has no trade clause. So all of these elements are percolating, and something's going to happen with Cousins soon, and if it is nothing, then that means 2023 will be his final year with the Vikings. However, what we're talking about today is every time on the offseason calendar, when it's time to contemplate Cousins' next extension, in this case, perhaps lack thereof, there's always this chirp, this nonsense that says that he should take a pay cut. Now, I understand in a vacuum that would be wonderful if your QB1, the guy who gets paid the most on the team, said, you know what, boys, I'm gonna play for cheap because we want to fill out this roster. If quarterbacks did that, if that was the lay of the land and it happened, for every 3 quarterbacks, one of them took a pay cut, sure, let's nominate Kirko for one of those. But they don't do it. So the working sentiment here is that Cousins should play for $25 million per year because he's self-aware enough to realize that he isn't elite. And in order to build out a Super Bowl winning team, he should be the guy that sacrifices, and then they can go sign an extra, player or two for the $10 million pay cut that he's going to take. I think that's the working theory. $25 million is the magic number over the last couple days in the Vikings orbit. That's the number Cousins should play for, is $25 million per season. Now, of course, that's a lot of money, but compared to the rest of the league and how the business works, it would be a substantial pay cut for Cousins. So I'm going to tell you why all that stuff is dumb, and it's not realistic. I don't know why we talk about it every time on the offseason calendar. Right now, Cousins, per average annual salary, earns $35 million per season. That is the 9th most in the NFL. So I don't know what your opinion is of Cousins. Usually when a season ends, he's around the 10th, 11th, 12th best quarterback in the league. Well, right now, the 10th, 11th, or 12th best quarterback in the league is the 9th highest paid. So we're really arguing about one rung on the ladder. All of these quarterback debates. And one of the most prominent problems when you talk about Cousins and his paycheck is that when you hear he makes $35 million, casual fans or even some that claim not to be casual fans, they assume that is a top 3 salary. It is not. It used to be, not very long ago, but $35 million per year is the 9th most in the NFL. But because it's so much money for most of us, you just assume, $35 million, that's got to be top 3, top 5. It ain't, but we just proceed accordingly as if it is. So he makes $35 million per year. I'm guessing if he's extended, it sounds like it's either going to be all or nothing, where he's not extended at all, or it's a longer-term thing, like an extra 3 years would be my guess. It'll probably be in the neighborhood of that $35 million. That would be my guess to align with what his performance is each season, which is usually the 10th, 11th, or 12th best in the league. His next contract, I believe, will be in that same territory. I think the number floating around is, what if he gets $40 million? That's too rich for my blood. However, the salary cap inflates each year, so 3 years from now, $40 million will be like, oh, that's the going rate for a decent quarterback. we try to adhere when we have this pay cut conversation to the Tom Brady standard. Because Tom Brady, who is rich aside from football, through his marriage at the time, through his endorsements, because he took a smaller chunk salary with the Patriots and then again with the Buccaneers, we assume that's what quarterbacks do, and therefore the quarterback of my favorite team and your favorite team should do that too. Let me break some news. Tom Brady's like the only guy that does that, or did that, because he's now retired. It was wonderful. It was great. Why can't they all do that? Well, they just don't. Brady had the means and wherewithal to accept it, to build out the fancy team around him, and it worked. But he is like the only quarterback that did it. I don't know why the expectation is that Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins or Matthew Stafford, all these guys that are kind of on the bubble of being damn good and being decent, why we think that they would just go out of their way to say, you know what, I'm going to take less money. Tom Brady did it. The one dude that did it was Tom Brady. You can mark that down. The NFL is these guys, these players, Kirk Cousins included, they're in it for this very marginal chunk of years. I think the average life expectancy in the NFL, at least per career length, is like, 2 or 3 years? We only know about the ones that, make it to the finish line. So in Cousins' case, it'll be, year 11? They're not in this for humanitarianism. If that was the goal of the sport, is to play for as cheap as possible and the thrills along the way, of course, we'd all sign up for endorsing pay cuts. But these guys, all of them, are in it to make money in this 2 to 12-year window and hopefully set themselves up for the rest of their lives if they manage their money well. They're not in the business of being humanitarians. They're not socialists. This is capitalism. The NFL, they're in it to make the money. On top of all that, floating this idea of Cousins and a pay cut, we already know that Cousins and his agent are shrewd businessmen. They make headlines seemingly every year about maximizing Kirk Cousins' contract. So I don't know why we even dribble into the dialogue of maybe he'll take a pay cut. They do the opposite. They find a way to have Kirk earn the most possible, and here we are in late February saying, oh, well, we want these guys who always maximize his pocketbook to take a pay cut. It doesn't happen. It's not realistic, but still, every offseason, it bubbles to the talking point, and it's like, oh, do you think he'll take a pay cut? It's like, no, he never does that. Why do we keep talking about it? So, oh boy, I'm trying to figure out the best way. The dialogue about this, it's a continued tendency by some media outlets to find something that they want. Sometimes it's, we're going to trade Kirk Cousins to the 49ers. And then you talk about it incessantly. Because you want it to happen, you keep talking about it. It's never realistic, but you keep talking about it because it's what you want to appease your emotions and your feelings. It's a talker. And I don't know. I think I like to be more focused on predictive and realism instead of these pipe dreams about maybe we're getting Trey Lance. Maybe Cousins will take a pay cut. I don't know why we rile up people into thinking that these things are realistic, and then every year passes and none of that shit happened. I don't understand it, and I don't think that I will. Having something that you want to have happen because, A, you don't really like Kirk Cousins or you think the Vikings are better off without him, advancing theories that he might take a pay cut is irresponsible because it's just what you want to have happen. It's on nobody else's agenda. I don't think the Vikings are waltzing up to Cousins and saying, hey, how does 20 or 25 million sound? It's insulting, especially compared to his peers. The biggest problem with this, now listen up, this is where I want you to know why suggesting a Cousins pay cut is problematic. So the dudes that do that, and you know who they are, they have a large platform. So when you tweet or you post on Facebook or you say on your radio show, Kirk Cousins should take $25 million per year, it gets it out in the open, in the stratosphere, as a realistic possibility. So there's folks, trust me, there's folks out and about in your community who don't follow the Vikings as much as you do or I do. And so they see the headline that says Cousins should take a pay cut for $25 million per year. They assume that is on the table. That's being chatted about in real life in Eagan, Minnesota by the team's leaders and by Kirk Cousins. And that's where the disconnect is. That's not happening. That's something that one guy or two guys is advancing and saying, this is a good idea. You should take a pay cut. Nowhere, anywhere is it realistic. It's a theory hatched by some guy. But it's interpreted by the masses as something that's ongoing and could possibly happen. And then what? Well, in a couple weeks here, perhaps a couple days, if Cousins is extended for $36 million per season, he looks like the villain for not taking the pay cut. And it was a pay cut that was never even on the radar for he and the team to begin with. But because it was put out in the digital community that this could happen, here's what we think should go down, $25 million per year, Cousins becomes the bad guy for not taking the pay cut. And it wasn't even supposed to happen in the first place. It's about the perception. So when you put these talkers out in front, bold font, same graphics, and say, Cousins, should he take a pay cut with an emoji that goes like this, it gets people thinking that that can actually happen. And it won't. It's the same thing every year. Every year when we get to Kirk Cousins extension talks, somebody pops up and says, wouldn't that be cool if he takes a pay cut? Here's why he should take a pay cut. He ain't very good. The team lost in the playoffs, or in years past, they didn't even get there. Therefore, he needs to take one for the team and be the one guy who plays for cheap. And then the calendar flips to April. We're on to the draft. Cousins didn't take a pay cut, but, bless their heart for bringing it up in the first place. That's the issue. And finally, concluding, and this is always the kicker, is at your job or at my job, if somebody said, you know what, I don't think Dustin Baker does a very good job, or I don't think you, Jenny Smith, do a very good job, you should take a pay cut, electively, you should suggest it, go to your management and say, I want to take less money. That never happens. Why would it happen in sports, too? You're not going to voluntarily endorse a pay cut, and you think that your favorite football player is going to do that? No. If you want that, then you don't need to live here in the capitalism society. You need to find some different governmental and economic structure. And it never adds up to me, once and for all, why this becomes a talking point. Because it's misguided outrage at something that's not even possible to begin with. Just because Tom Brady did it, that means that other guys are going to follow suit. Nobody else follows suit except for Tom Brady when it comes to taking pay cuts at QB1. Now, if it turns out that Cousins takes a pay cut, great, wonderful, but I don't want you to head into free agency or these contract talks thinking that that's being talked about, because it ain't. The only people talking about it are the people that don't really care for Cousins, that don't think that he's worth $35 million. So I guess $25 million is the magic number in their estimation, but it's just not going to happen. All right, we'll be back with Josh Fry tomorrow to talk more about the offseason. Again, free agency is the week of March 13th, the legal tampering, and then guys can actually sign on the 15th of March. Skol, baby.